Tonight, a slam dunk turns into a missed layup. President Trump visiting the troops in Iraq, and instead of a photo op and a moral builder, well, the president, he made it all about, you guessed it, himself, and he politicized the whole thing. Then, a professor at the Naval War College, he'll join us to discuss the continued fallout from the sudden departure of Defense Secretary James Mattis and the troop withdrawal from Syria and the consequences it could bring. Also, a little history lesson about one Donald J. Trump. Now, before he ran for president, he ran several companies, well, into the ground. He also tried to get into the tabs as much as he could in New York. We're going to take a look back at that Trump and also what it tells us about what we're seeing today in the White House. Evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you for joining us. It was, as they say, a presidential moment, one worthy of praise and maybe even a little applause as well. But yesterday, under the cover of night and in secret, as all these trips are for security purposes, President Trump and the First Lady, they visited Iraq to finally visit with American soldiers. This his first visit to troops in a combat zone since he was sworn in. President Trump getting praise for the trip, and rightfully so, but even yesterday, in what should have been a highlight reel, a presidential moment for him, overdue though it might have been, he still at the end was Donald Trump, trampling norms and trading on the truth, as always. Now, for more, I want to bring in our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman, and like we said, this should have been a layup. Every president does this. He no different. Maybe it took him forever to it. But even then, he had to make it about himself, not the troops.
And we want to be clear, Rich, we're doing this without taking anything away from the meaning and symbolism of the president's visit with service members. But as you mentioned, there were some issues, including some odd personal stories, some serious departures from the norms, lies aimed at making himself look better, and a rather serious question about how, where, and why we put our soldiers' lives at risk. First, this statement from the president to the troops.
You just got one of the biggest pay raises you've ever received, unless you don't want it. You know what? Nobody deserves it more. You haven't gotten one in more than 10 years. More than 10 years. And we got you a big one. I got you a big one.
You know what? Both parts of that boast are false. Our military has received pay raises every year since 1983. It's a claim that gets a pants on fire from PolitiFact. And his claim of a 10% increase, much bigger than past years, also false. First of all, the raise for 2019 is just 2.6%, not 10%. That's up slightly from this year's 2.4% pay raise. And both, the really big one that he said he just got, pale in comparison to the raises that our military got in 2008, 2009, and 2010. Later, the president talked to reporters about the dangers that he faced just getting to Iraq as he rode in on the most protected aircraft in the world. What difficulties did he face?
If you would have seen what we had to go through with the darkened plane, with all windows closed, with no lights on whatsoever, anywhere, pitch black, I've never seen it.
Perhaps so, but well, he was meeting with service members who deal with moments like these far more often than they should have to. They're putting their lives on their line every day. He took an awkward plane ride. And let's not forget how many of these heroes we've lost to the violence in Iraq. 17 people this year alone, 59 since 2016, and 4,563 American military deaths in Iraq since 2003. But, you know, the plane was dark. While in Iraq, Mr. Trump also broke an unwritten rule of the military, and it's a simple one, not to use these people for politics. But that's exactly what the president did yesterday.
The Democrats don't want to let us have strong borders. Only for one reason. You know why? Because I want it. Just looking at this warrior group, I think I'll say, I don't want the wall. And then they're going to give it to me. I figured out the solution. First Lady, tell Nancy Pelosi, I don't want the wall. Oh, we want the wall. And we get the wall.
You know, there used to be a saying in Washington that politics stops at the water's edge. That, no matter what's going on in D.C., that family business, as it were, to be kept inside our American family. Mr. Trump has done this before, like sending the troops to the border just before Election Day, politicizing our troops. Finally, what was, for me at least, the most serious breach of protocol from the president yesterday, one that asks a lot of uncomfortable questions about how and where we deploy our military. Here's what he said.
If they want us to do the fighting, they also have to pay a price. And sometimes that's also a monetary price. So we're not the suckers of the world. We're no longer the suckers, folks. And people aren't looking at us as suckers.
There's a lot to unpack there. If we were suckers in Iraq until now, does that mean the 4,500 Americans who died there were also suckers? Did he just tell them that our fallen soldiers died for no good reason? And what does this mean for how we will use our military? If he wants money from our allies, will he refuse to help if they don't pay? Those comments are a reminder that after World War II, the U.S. gave more than $12 billion in money and aid to our allies in Europe. By the way, that would be worth more than $100 billion today, and we never asked for a penny of it back. Why? Because strong allies make America safer, and because not helping would have been far more expensive if we needed to go back in to clean up whatever chaos might have happened had we not been there to help, all thanks to the Marshall Plan. Rich?
And it's arguably some of the best money we ever spent, and it cemented who we are as a country. I'm going to have a military guest on in the following segment. Then we're going to get into some of the ramifications of why Mattis left and what it says and leaves behind.
And even back here at home, by the way, after the Marshall Plan, the most prosperous era we've ever had in the United States.
We had trading partners who needed us and could actually trade with us. But that's history. When you get to the present day, my gosh, first of all, the idea that he just up and got on the plane and went over, took weeks in planning.
Sure.
And that's what it should take. And you know what? Every president went before. Listen, whatever you can argue about the Iraq war, you can have good, legitimate debates in this country, I get it. But when George Bush went there, he didn't go attack the other political party. He said thank you to the troops. He said America was behind you. You said it. When I heard him say suckers, and when I heard him trying to use it, the guys like a political prop, I thought of the Boy Scouts, Andrew. Remember?
Yeah.
On the campaign, he went there and literally he was banned from the Boy Scouts because he was using the venue of these kids in the Boy Scouts who were there by definition to do honorable deeds for other people, selfless acts. He made it about him, and literally the Boy Scouts banned him. He did it again yesterday. Couldn't he have just had a presidential moment and then detractors like me and you could have said, oh, you know what? He can find it within himself to make it about something other than himself, but he couldn't even do it. He couldn't even do it there.
You know, you would think so. And again, I don't want to disparage him for going to visit the troops because that's what he should do. The troops get something out of this too. This is a positive, and he deserves credit for him. But I can only assume it's a character flaw at this point that he simply cannot avoid mentioning himself or trying to do the sales pitch when he's got the microphone and he's got the attention on him. I don't know what it is.
And how about the moment, Andrew? We are in a cycle where legitimate people from his own party and his own cabinet are saying, my God, our president just fired, or he had the most decorated military person, General Mattis, the one adult in his administration that had universal respect on the Hill. He just walked out because of how he felt this man on our screen was disparaging not only our allies, but also enabling our enemies, and without respect for the military or its institutions. The stories reminding everybody about how he dodged the draft here and used influence and didn't even try to feel bad about it in terms of the Bone Spurs. And he goes over there with that hanging over him and should have shown some modesty or appreciation, but he walked in like he was a conquering hero.
The other irony in that, we talked about the Marshall Plan and how, you know, if we just vacated Europe, bad things would have happened, it would have been that much more expensive. The pullout of Syria, he's already said, if there's a problem in Syria, if we need to go back in, we'll just have our troops in Iraq go in and take care of that on mission. So the people he was talking to yesterday are the ones who are going to wind up potentially in harm's way if the pullout in Syria is handled poorly enough that there becomes the need for it again. So he comes in like the conquering hero, but he's very much running the risk of putting those specific lives in danger because of the policy decisions that he's made. And again, never sold to the American public. That's the other part in all of this. You want to withdraw from Syria, you want to withdraw from Afghanistan, there are valid arguments to be made for doing both. Make the arguments. He never has done it. When did he address the American public and say, here's why we're doing what we're doing? When did he make the sales pitch to the nation?
And the more we hear about the genesis of his decision to withdraw, literally a phone call that he was given notes advising him on how to handle it, and he did a 180 because he didn't like what he was hearing on the other side of the phone. That's how we do diplomacy and make policy in this country. It's a very scary time. I don't care who you voted for. I don't care which party you align yourself with. This is not in the national interest to do business this way, and nobody, even from his own cabinet, is applauding what's going on behind the scenes. And can you just doff your hat, appreciate the service of our troops, and don't make it for once about you. That's the part, like you said, that and the sucker comment, that was, ugh.
And this other concern, where if he's willing to send troops to the border for a specious reason, if he's willing to use them as props in Iraq, what's to stop him from using it from a wag the dog moment? From some point, trying to take political advantage out of actually sending them into combat. Fingers crossed that doesn't happen.
Well, we're going to get into the next segment because the world's getting to be a more dangerous place by some of our own actions. When we come back, the turmoil in U.S. foreign policy impacting our friends and foes alike. After the break, we go around the world to hotspots that are getting hotter with a professor at the Navy War College.